the legislature, which is part, of course, of the federal government. I want you to start on pages 8 and 9 of your plaquette. 8 and 9 of the plaquette, which is this. Il faut qu'on s'arrête à 5 minutes aujourd'hui. Okay. This schema on the top here is what's called the checks and balances. So you have 3 boxes, okay? The 3 boxes for 3 branches of government, right? The legislative, the executive, the judiciary. Est-ce que vous avez cette page devant vos yeux? Pour qu'on feuillette là un peu. Voilà, très bien. Le 8, il est là. Le numéro de page sont écrits à la main. So, check means vérifier, but not here. Check here means frein, obstacle. Okay, checks and balances. So this is like the rule of the system. Each part of government can check and balance the other part. For example, I mean, there are many examples here. I don't want to. I want you to read these and understand them. Okay, I want you to do some lecture yourself. Donc, quand j'arrive là, okay, c'est très peu. Regardez, c'est tout petit cette plaquette, non? Vous avez ça, vous avez quelques documents sur un métis. Je vous invite donc à lire ça. Imaginez, on ferait un cours de littérature. Vous avez des romans de 200 pages à lire. Oui? Okay? So it would be fantastic if I could say, okay, on page 8, you've read page 8. But I don't think you've read page 8, have you? Has anybody read page 8? Maybe. Okay. So you need to read this thing. It's very small. Okay, all right? So here you see ways in which each part of the government can check and balance the others. For example, look at the first box, okay? Only Congress can pass laws. You there? You follow the text, yeah? Only Congress can pass laws. But the president can veto the laws. Oui? Si vous regardez dans l'executive branch, le deuxième truc, c'est president may veto bills before they become law. Bill is a projet de loi. Yeah? Okay? So the Congress proposes laws, the president can veto the law. And then number 2 in the legislative branch, the Congress may override, annuler the presidential veto with enough votes against the presidential veto. You understand? Il faut les 2 tiers des membres du Congrès pour contrecarrer un veto du président. Yeah? And then, for example, number 4 in the executive branch, the president chooses federal judges, cabinet officials, and ambassadors. The cabinet is his kind of group of conseillers, advisors. Yeah? The cabinet is what you call a ministre, ministre de l'environnement, ministre, etc. In Britain they're called ministers. In America they're called secretaries. Okay, so for example, the ministre des Affaires étrangères in America is called the Secretary of State. Secretary d'État. Okay? Secretaries. So all the secretaries together form the cabinet. Okay? I'll talk about that when we talk about the executive. So the president chooses federal judges, cabinet officials, and ambassadors. Okay, but then look at number 3 in the legislative branch. Il y a donc le 3e terme dans la boîte 1 là. The Senate must approve presidential nominations for federal judges, cabinet officials, and ambassadors. Okay, so if the Congress doesn't approve the judge, then the judge doesn't get into the court, right? Yeah? Or number 6 in the legislative branch, Congress may impeach. So impeach is a big word we're going to look at today. Impeachment. To impeach means to accuse. Oui, en vue d'une destitution. Yeah? But to impeach is a verb, it means to accuse. Okay? So impeachment, Trump was impeached twice. Je ne sais pas si vous avez suivi ça. Oui? Oui, ça n'avait jamais marché, c'était évident, c'était couru d'avance. In fact, it was a distraction, it was ridiculous. But to impeach is to accuse. Okay? And impeachment is the accusation, but impeachment is also the whole process, right? So, number 6 in the legislative branch, Congress may impeach, try, meaning juger, and remove a president or federal judge for serious crimes, right? Number 5 in the legislative branch, only Congress may declare war. Okay, that's one of the powers of Congress. So the president cannot declare war, right? So, for example, the Americans never declared war in Vietnam. Il n'y a jamais eu de guerre de Vietnam. Ça n'a jamais eu lieu, la guerre de Vietnam, because it wasn't a war. Okay, the Americans never declared war on Vietnam. Okay, but number 6 in the executive branch, look at the power of the president. The president may deploy troops, envoyer l'armée, troops, and determine military strategy without the consent of Congress. So only Congress can declare war, but the president can send the army. So like, for example, in 1969, 69, Nixon, the president, in Vietnam, he ordered the bombing, the bombardement de Laos and the Cambodge. Yeah? The Americans bombed Cambodia, and Congress was not informed. Congress did not know that Nixon was bombing Cambodia, right? And he bombed Vietnam, of course, with something called Agent Orange, which is the defoliant, right, to get the leaves off the trees, yeah, so that they could see the Viet Cong, they could see the North Vietnamese soldiers through the trees. Donc ils ont déversé des millions de litres de Agent Orange sur la forêt. Agent Orange is made by Monsanto. You know Monsanto? It's a corporation of, it's a pharmacological, yeah, they make pesticide, yeah, insecticide. Now they're bought by a German company called Bayer. They're evil. Monsanto is like the evil corporation, yeah. They're evil towards their own workers, yeah. Monsanto owns 95% of the agricultural seed in the world. 95% des graines au monde appartiennent à Monsanto in agriculture. Okay? And of course they're trafiqués, right? They're modifiés. So, for example, Indian farmers, they have to keep buying Monsanto seed because they can't take seed every year and cultivate from the seed they already have because the seeds are sterile. They don't reproduce, right? So you have, for example, in one province, region of India, in 1 year among farmers, il y avait 250,000 suicides parmi les fermiers indiens, yeah? Because they just couldn't afford to keep paying Monsanto for the seed. Okay? So Monsanto started their glorious career by bombing Vietnam with Agent Orange. Okay, that was Nixon without the consent of Congress. It's in the Constitution. Without the consent of Congress. Another example of this is that Congress can make a law, that's what Congress does, yeah, légiférer. And then if you look in the judicial branch box, you see the box here with the judicial branch, you have one element here which is crucial, this power of the judicial branch. The courts, the tribunal, determine the constitutionality of laws. Donc, si it's the Supreme Court who decides si oui ou non a law is conforme à la Constitution, if it's constitutional or not. Okay, and that power, and if it's not constitutional, then it strikes down exemple, on a le Texas abortion ban, yeah? 6 semaines limite de grossesse pour l'avortement au Texas. That's unconstitutional, right? So the Supreme Court will eventually judge that that law is unconstitutional, right? So the law will fall. Okay, all right? That power of the judicial branch has a name, and I give you the name, you can write the name down in the box, because on va revenir beaucoup sur ces deux mots. It's called Judicial Review. Judicial Review. R-E-V-I-E-W. R-E-V-I-E-W. Judicial Review. So the Supreme Court judges if law is constitutional or not, thanks to its power of judicial review. Et je vais revenir aussi en détail sur la manière dont la Cour suprême s'est octroyé ce pouvoir suprême. C'est le pouvoir suprême de la Cour suprême, is judicial review. Okay? And it's very strange. I'll just give it to you now, les grandes lignes. Is that the very first act of Congress, okay, the very first act of Congress, 1789, was called the Judiciary Act. Okay? The Judiciary Act. So the Judiciary Act wanted to give certain powers to the courts, les tribunaux. Okay? Encore une fois, on va revenir en détail sur ça, sauf qu'il y a quelques grandes lignes. So, en 1803, arrive un cas où il y a un certain Mr. Marbury, un homme, who was given a job in the government, okay, by President Adams, but he didn't get his contract, okay? He didn't get his contract. So, the government changed, and Jefferson became president. So this guy Marbury said, I want my contract. Okay? And he went to the Supreme Court and he said, you have the power to oblige the government to give me my contract. Yeah? You have the power, it was given to you in the Judiciary Act. Est-ce que vous suivez là? Le premier acte du Congrès was called the Judiciary Act. Donc de 89. In the Judiciary Act, donc le Congrès donne à la Cour suprême certains pouvoirs qui vont au-delà des pouvoirs qui sont stipulés dans la Constitution, dans le 3e article de la Constitution où il est question de la Cour suprême. C'est le seul, l'unique tribunal dont il est question dans la Constitution, c'est la Cour suprême. Okay? Le seul tribunal fédéral, c'est la Cour suprême, en 1789. Okay? Donc, Marbury, en 1803, he says to the Cour suprême, vous, selon the Judiciary Act, you have the power to oblige the government to give me my contract. And it's in the Judiciary Act. Okay? The Supreme Court has the power to force the government, the executive, to do certain things. So what did the Supreme Court judgment say? Donc la Cour suprême devait trancher cette question et décider donc du cas de ce monsieur Marbury. And the Cour suprême said, look, the Judiciary Act, donc le premier acte du Congrès, goes too far. The Judiciary Act goes further than the Constitution. The Judiciary Act gives us, the Supreme Court, too much power. Too much power. So the Judiciary Act is not conform à la Constitution. Right? So the Judiciary Act fell. Marbury did not get his commission. And the Supreme Court gave itself this power of judicial review, qui était donc, je répète, le pouvoir de juger la constitutionnalité des lois, oui, en se privant de pouvoirs, certains pouvoirs donnés par le premier acte du Congrès. Alors, la Cour suprême a dit que nous n'avons pas ces pouvoirs, nous ne devons pas avoir ces pouvoirs, yeah, donnés par le Judiciary Act, parce que ça va trop loin par rapport à la Constitution. Donc, d'une main, ils disent qu'ils abandonnent les pouvoirs du Judiciary Act, de l'autre main, ils prennent ce pouvoir suprême de Judicial Review, de juger toutes les lois selon la Constitution. Oui? Do you understand that? To judge the constitutionality of laws, right? That's the supreme power of the Supreme Court, okay? So you realize that there are different levels of law in the United States, yeah? And I've given you a word before, and I give it to you again in case you forgot, yeah? Les actes de l'Assemblée nationale, les lois françaises, les lois du 29 juillet 1881 qui interdit l'affichage sur les murs de Paris, yeah? Et c'est écrit loi du 29 juillet 1, les lois, code pénal, code civil, acts of Congress in America, acts of Parliament in Britain, these are all called statute laws. Okay, statute laws. S-T-A-T-U-T-E. Statute law, ça veut dire les actes du Parlement, du Congrès, de l'Assemblée, etc. In France, statute law is supreme. Code civil, code pénal. French law, statute law is supreme. Okay? Because it's Roman law. Like in Scotland, it's the same. Scotland has Roman law, like France. Okay? Not England. Doesn't have that. In America, statute law is the fourth level of laws. Okay? C'est le quatrième niveau. Okay? Le troisième niveau, c'est ce qu'on appelle jurisprudence. C'est-à-dire l'historique des jugements de la Cour suprême. You have the word in French, jurisprudence, yes? Okay? It's just the judgments of courts, okay? Because it's the Supreme Court, right? The Supreme Court judges whether laws are conform ou non à la Constitution. Okay? So statute law, jurisprudence. Then the second level is the articles of the Constitution. And the first level is the principles of the Constitution. Okay? Remember, the Constitution is an amendable document. The Constitution is not a fixed document. It's amendable. It's elastic. C'est le mot qu'on utilise. And it's elastic, donc ça va être changé, amendé, selon quoi? Selon les principes de la Constitution, les principes fondateurs de la Constitution. Yeah? Though that is the supreme law of the United States. Okay? Because 1 and 2 is the Constitution, 3 is jurisprudence, 4 is statute law. Okay? Right? So, coming back to this then, page 8, you've got checks and balances, right? This system, and you can look at the detail. And I invite you, donc je vous invite donc à lire ces termes, okay? Réfléchir sur ces éléments. Okay? On page 9, you've got a different kind of rapport de force et de pouvoir. Okay. Page 8, c'est uniquement entre les branches du gouvernement fédéral. So I just repeat something I've said before, which is that in these lectures, I'm just looking at federal institutions. Okay, I'm looking at federal courts, federal assembly, federal Congress. But in the United States, because it's a federal system, one of the strange things in the American system is that you have each national institution has a replica at the level of the state. Okay? So that, for example, in Florida, you have a Supreme Court of Florida. You have a Senate in Florida. You have a House of Representatives in Florida. It's a state Supreme Court enacting, or rather judging state laws. It's a state Senate legislating for state laws, and the state House of Representatives also legislating for state laws. Okay? Yeah? So it's confusing when you look at the system together. For example, en 2000, l'élection présidentielle, Bush and Gore, yeah? Bush lost the popular vote. Il y a une histoire assez rocambolesque de décompte des bulletins de vote en Floride, parce qu'il y avait à ce moment-là, les bulletins de vote, c'était des petits trucs un peu cartonnés, avec des tout petits bouts de papier comme ça. Il fallait percer avec un petit outil fourni dans les bureaux de vote. Donc tu devais percer le truc et faire un trou là où tu voulais mettre ta main. Ok? was a problem with the paper, that there were these little things called chads. The chad is a little microscopic little piece of papier cartonné, which wouldn't go completely. So you push it through and it hangs there. It just hangs on the paper. And then when you pile them up, the hanging chad, it comes back up again, and it closes the hole. So this big problem in l'an 2000, c'était cette phrase qu'on disait partout, the hanging chads. Okay? And so the Democrats wanted to count and recount and check these. Yeah? But of course, the governor of Florida, le gouverneur de l'État de Floride, c'était le frère de Bush, Jeb Bush, le petit frère de Bush, qui était gouverneur de Floride. Donc à un moment donné, il met la pression sur la Cour suprême de Floride pour trancher que on arrête là le décompte. Yeah? Basta così. Yeah? No more counting. That was the state Supreme Court of Florida decided that for Florida. So of course the Democrats then went up to the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, who had to judge about the state Supreme Court's decision. Okay? And eventually, because of all kinds of magouille, the federal Supreme Court said, yeah, we stopped the count. Bush became president. He had fewer votes than Gore. Like, for example, Trump had 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton a eu 3 millions de voix de plus que Trump. Mais c'est lui qui était élu. Okay. Alors ça, c'est toute une autre question. The electoral system. So on page 9, you have this distribution of powers. Okay, so look at page 9. I don't want to prendre ma table là-dessus. On the left, you've got two tables, yeah? Table 1 and table 2. Yeah? Have you got that in front of you? Yeah? So table 1 is powers specifically granted, octroyés, donné, by the Constitution. So these are positive powers. Table 2 are powers denied, refusés by the Constitution. On the left, donc vous avez trois colonnes. On the left, you've got the federal government, national government, c'est la même chose, okay? And on the right, you've got state governments, all right? Ça veut dire les gouvernements de chaque État, okay? And if you look I don't want to look at this particularly, and in the middle, you've got the pouvoir partagé, shared powers, okay? So if you look on the left at the bottom, you've got the powers which are denied to the federal government. There are three, okay? Three powers denied to the federal government. One is to tax articles exported from one state to another. I looked at that last week in relation to slavery, yeah? I mean, articles, ça veut dire des esclaves, essentially, yeah? To violate the Bill of Rights, to change state boundaries. Can I just ask you a question? Where do you find the Bill of Rights? What is the Bill of Rights? Does anybody know? Yes. Good, thank you. Yes, the first 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights. Okay. So the national government does not have the power to violate the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is like the Bible. Okay, yeah? And the first 5 words of the Bill of Rights, Congress shall make no law. Okay, the first right, inviolable, is a limit on the power of Congress. Okay? So I'd like to just go to look at page 12. So what I want to do for the rest of today's time, I want to talk a little bit about who is in Congress, okay? Who's in Congress, and what powers the House of Representatives has particularly, and some of the differences between the House of Representatives and the Senate, okay? So on page 12, section 3, clause 1, talks about the Senate, okay? The Senate of the United States, so I'm reading page 12, section 3, clause 1. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. Donc ça, c'est selon le plan de quel État ça? Quel État, colonie, État a voulu le même nombre de représentants par État. It's called the something plan. A little state near New York, next to New York City, heavily industrialized. New Jersey. Okay, New Jersey plan, New Jersey, it's in New York. New Jersey plan is the Senate, okay, equal number, right? How many states are there? 50 states, okay. So, je lis, donc, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof. Tiens. Donc, en 1789, senators are not elected by the people. Senators are chosen by the state legislatures. Yeah? Le Congrès de chaque État choisit des sénateurs. Okay? That lasted, il y a une petite annotation, jusqu'en 1913, donc aussi, donc vous passez à la page 19. Article 70. Article 70. The Senate of the United States, donc je lis en bas à gauche de la page 19. Yeah, c'est daté, il faut toujours regarder les dates des amendements. Yeah, 1913, qui est aussi l'année où ils ont découvert l'impôt sur le revenu. Okay, donc c'était une grande année pour la démocratie, ça. The Senate of the United States, donc je lis, maintenant on est en 1913. Donc, en 1789, the senators were chosen by the state assembly. Yeah? The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the people thereof. So in 1913, they decided that actually it's better to have the senators elected by the people of the state. Okay? So jusqu'en 1913, senators were not elected by people. Okay, they were elected by the people who were nominated to the assembly. All right. I want to go back to page 11. So, and talk a little bit about House of Representatives. So, you'll find that I'm going to give you some facts, some elements, which you can find in these pages. Okay, in these particular 11 et 12. To be a representative, you have to be 25 years old, say Section 2, Clause 2. Okay? You have to be 25 years old to be a representative. On the next page, you'll find that you have to be 30 years old to be a senator. 30 ans. For a minimum 30 ans pour être sénateur. To be president, c'est quoi l'âge minimal, vous pensez, pour être président? 35 ans, you have 35 to be president. To be a representative, you have to have been a citizen since 7 years. Okay? You have to live in your district. So I'll just give you a couple of pieces of vocabulary. You can add them to your lexique. The French word circonscription. Yeah? A député has a circonscription, right? In English, that's called a constituency. C-O-N-S-T-I-T-U-E-N-C-Y. Constituency. A constituency is a circonscription. C-O-N-S-T-I-T-U-E-N-C-Y. Constituency. Et les gens qui sont dans la constituency, qui votent pour le représentant, s'appellent constituents. Donc c'est TS à la fin au lieu de CY. Constituents. Okay, your constituents. So, the constituency of a senator is a state. The senators represent the state. The constituency of a representative is called a district. Okay, a district. So representatives are elected every 2 years. Every 2 years, there's a legislative. Imagine that in France. Every 2 years, you have legislative elections for the representatives. Senators are elected every 6 years. So senators stay in the Senate for 6 years before having to campaign. Representatives are always campaigning, so toujours en campagne. Representatives are often much younger than senators. Representatives are very close to their constituents. Yeah? Ils sont très à l'écoute. Representatives are very accessible. Yeah? They're very close to their. Yeah? Vous êtes qui, vous? Comment? Cours. À quelle heure vous avez cours? Non, allez dégager, s'il vous plaît. Vous êtes des petits clowns qui ont trop bu. C'est pas drôle. Oui, non, vous n'êtes pas excusé, vous êtes criminel. Enfin, voilà. So, representatives are chosen every 2 years. They're very close to their constituents, okay? Yeah? They're very close to their constituents. And they have a different object to senators. The House of Representatives has two prime powers, okay? One is the power to impeach the president, yeah? To accuser, porter une accusation en vue d'une destitution. Okay, that's the first power of the representatives. The second power of the representatives is a financial power, okay? I want to look at page 13, okay, number 8. Page 13, number 8. The Congress shall have power. Donc, section 8, clause 1, page 13, en bas à gauche. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. So, créer des impôts is the first power enumerated of Congress, and it's the House of Representatives that has that power. So I give you a phrase used. Purse, P-U-S-S-E, means a porte-money. Okay, the purse. Congress has what's called the power of the purse. Congress controls government money. Okay, now that's the main power of the House of Representatives, is to control government money. Fiscal policy, policy of taxation, is House of Representatives, not the Senate, the House of Representatives. Number 2 here, to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Okay, so to manage, to gérer the national debt. Okay, the House of Representatives manages the national debt. 3, to regulate commerce. Okay, trade is regulated by Congress, not by the executive. 5, to coin money, to créer money, financial powers. 6, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is contrefaçon. To make sure that the dollars are genuine dollars. Okay. And then you have other powers which seem a little bit picturesque, but are not. Of course, number 8, to promote the progress of science and useful arts. Scientific progress is a congressional power. Innovation is a constitutional article. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for a limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Ça veut dire les brevets, la propriété intellectuelle. So the American Constitution in Article 1 talks about intellectual property rights. Yeah? Okay? Which of course is one reason why American firms are extremely jealous of their patents, their brevets. Yeah? To number 9, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. Tribunal is a court. So, these are the powers of Congress. Yeah? In the Constitution, there is only one federal court. The only federal court defined in the Constitution is the Supreme Court. Okay, in Article 3, we'll look at that later. Congress has the power to create other courts. So now, in the American federal système, et encore une fois, je ne parle que du système fédéral, des lois fédérales, et non pas des lois des États. Okay? Do you remember the grandfather clause? Do you remember that? No? You don't remember that? I told you this earlier. Wait. So, when did black Americans get the right to vote? I talked about this. There are 3 amendments for slaves, for black Americans. 13 is soi-disant abolition of slavery, qui n'en est pas une, non? On a regardé ça. 14 is the nationality, citizenship rights for black Americans. And 15, Amendment 15, is the right to vote. Okay? Donc 1870, 15th Amendment, right? But if you look in at those amendments, si on regarde les amendements, page 18-19, page 18-19, articles donc les 13e, 14e, 15e amendements, regardez le dernier paragraphe de chaque amendement est identique. Yeah? So, look at Article 13. Section 1 is this abolition of slavery, which is not the abolition of slavery, okay? Section 2, je lis, donc, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Just think about that. Ça, c'est des mots qui vous rentrent par un œil et qui sortent par l'autre, non? Yeah? I mean, it's plus banal, tu meurs. You think, what the hell? But think about it. They passed an amendment, a constitutional amendment that abolishes slavery. Okay? Then they have to add a clause saying that Congress will have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. C'est-à-dire, le Congrès aura le pouvoir de créer des lois, statute laws, pour appliquer cet amendement. Well, why do they need to do that? And then 14, 14 black Americans have citizenship. But Section 5, the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Article 15, je lis, not la totalité de l'article 15. Okay? The right of citizens, donc 1870, okay? The right of citizens of the United States, okay, black people, right, to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Okay, the right to vote. But then, Section 2, the Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Donc, en 1870, there is the right to vote, because black people didn't vote. Why not? You had to wait till 1965. 1965, donc 95 ans plus tard, and an act of Congress called the Voting Rights Act, c'est un grand moment des États-Unis, 1965, President Johnson, the Voting Rights Act, which enforced the amendment rights. Okay? So these acts were necessary to enforce the law. I just repeat, the 3 branches of government, the legislature makes the law, the executive enforces the law, the judiciary judges the law. Okay? Makes the law, enforces the law, judges the law. Clause, right? So I come back to page 11, Article 1. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1, tout au début de la Constitution, or page 11. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors, so they'll be chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire tout ça? Donc il y a ce mot qui peut induire en erreur les Européens, the word electors. Electors here does not mean les électeurs. Yeah? Macron, Le Pen vont chercher des électeurs. Yeah? Okay? Electors here means notable du parti. Yeah? People with qualifications, right? You have to have certain qualifications to vote for the representatives. Okay? These are called electors. And when I come to talk about the American presidential election, I'll talk about the electors. Okay? Because it's not the same as the French system. Yeah? If millions of people vote for Macron more than Le Pen, then Macron becomes president. Not in America. Okay? I've mentioned that. So I want to come back to the other power of the House of Representatives, which is the money power. But before I want to look at that, so Article 1 is the powers and structures of and functions of Congress. Okay, it's Article 1. It talks about representatives being elected every 2 years, senators elected every 6 years, representatives dealing with financial questions, senators dealing with foreign policy, and also with presidential nominations. I'd like to just notice a couple of things. Donc, à la fin de la page 12 et début de la page 13, donc cette clause 2 de la section 6, no senator or representative, donc tout à fait en bas à droite de 12 et en haut à gauche de 13, no senator or representative shall, in the time for which he is elected, be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, which means no cumul de fonctions. Yeah? You know Alain Juppé. Juppé was maire de Bordeaux et Premier ministre. Et il habitait le 7e arrondissement de Paris, next to my office. But he was maire de Bordeaux and Premier ministre, and he's living in the 7e arrondissement. What's going on? This is impossible in the American Constitution. Okay? There's no cumul de fonctions. And si vous regardez juste la première clause de section 6, juste au-dessus, the senator and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services. Vous suivez le texte là, oui? So we're page 12 en bas à droite, section 6, clause 1. Yeah? The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law, paid out to the Treasury of the United States, or the salaire. They shall in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, which means that they have an immunity from arrest. A congressperson cannot be arrested in Congress, okay, unless they've committed one of these 3 chefs d'accusation for impeachment, right? Treason, bribery, or high crime or misdemeanor, in which case there is no presidential immunity. Yeah, there's no immunity from prosecution, okay? And I'll come back to that next week. I'm doing it kind of fast. There's one thing I want to look at, just one more thing I want to look at before we finish, is a word. I want you to get this word in your head. Okay, it's power number 12, page 13. Page 13. Number 11 is the declaration of war. Donc, the Congress has the power to declare war. Grant letters of marque and reprisal, ça veut dire, en fait, ça veut dire entériner les pirates, ça veut dire donner aux pirates le pouvoir de voler d'autres navires au compte pour le compte des États-Unis. So the letter of marque, tu donnes à un pirate pour qu'il devienne employé des Nations Unies. Number 12, to raise and support armies. That's the power of Congress. But no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So I want you to look up this word appropriations. Yeah? The executive, the president, cannot use federal money unless the House of Representatives gives it to him. How do the representatives who control federal money, how do they give money to, say, Bush or Trump to bomb Iraq? Yeah, bombing Iraq is very expensive. Yeah, each bomb costs $1 million. $1 million for a bomb. So what happens is that Congress passes a law, bill is a projet de loi, called an appropriations bill. Ce mot peut vous paraître très complexe et obscur, mais c'est quotidien au Congrès. Les gens parlent d'appropriation. Appropriations bill is a bill which reserves federal money for a particular use. So Bush goes to Congress, says, I need $82 billion. J'ai besoin de 82 milliards de dollars pour bombarder l'Irak. Congress says, okay, we pass an appropriations bill that gives $82 billion to the president so that he can bomb Iraq. Only for that. Okay? And then if he needs more money, he has to come back to Congress to get another appropriations bill passed. Okay? So that word appropriations appears several times in the Constitution. I want you to look it up. Okay, we're going to stop there. I'll continue after the holiday with the legislature. Okay? If you have any questions, you can always send me an email. Alright? I will answer your email when we chat. Okay? Alright, I do answer emails.